let's get you the latest from Eastern Europe now. Ukraine says it's recovered 410 civilian bodies in the Kyiv region, which it actually reclaimed from Russia. President Volodymyr Zelensky accusing Russia of committing genocide in his country as the war continues. Let's get you the latest, bring in a journalist who works in that area. Her name is Kateryna Malofieieva, and she joins us now from Kharkiv, which is the second largest city in Ukraine. Great to have you on the program, Kateryna. Thanks so much for making time. I mean, let me just gauge from your vantage point what the reaction has been to what Ukraine is saying it's found in, the Kyiv region. It's the cities like Bucha, for instance, where we're told that quite literally bodies have been found along the streets. What's been the reaction to that?
That's a very important and right question right now, because I think that Ukrainian population was not didn't expect such atrocities to be committed by the Russians, because I mean I keep reading over and over again the messages, the posts, Facebook posts of my friends who are just absolutely terrified by the scene they've seen. And at the same time, unfortunately, the anger that it evokes leads to some sort of calls even to eliminate all Russians. Some of our politicians in Ukraine were so terrified by the pictures they've seen that they really called for atrocities also to commit whenever they see the Russians. Yes, I need to, unfortunately, to say about this. Talking about the overall Ukrainians, people are, of course, calling for the ICC to take an action. European Commission promised to be involved in the investigation of these atrocities, because I mean, so far I've seen those the reports about those 280 men that were people that were killed in Bucha, so that majority of them were executed for participating in the military activity in 2014-2015, when they were actually mobilized by the Ukrainian government. So they were not volunteers, they were mobilized. So apparently the Russian troops did tortures to them, committed the different crimes. They tied their hands together and shot by gun into the head or heart directly. So, but it's impossible to kind of excuse these sort of things at all. So, and of course, Ukrainians are absolutely terrified about the pictures they've seen, and they're saying overall that there is no forgiveness for this. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also yesterday called for mothers of those Russian soldiers who committed those war crimes. He said that look who you actually gave birth to the marauders, to looters, for the criminals. Right. Look who've done this.
Sure. Part of what also has been making headlines is Ukraine saying that it's now been able to gain control of the whole of Kyiv. I wonder, again, from what you're able to gauge, whether that is enough for those who fled Kyiv to return there.
Well, people are coming back slowly. I can also see this in Kharkiv, because Kharkiv, in comparison to Kyiv, is smaller, but the shelling is more often here because, for example, the Russian troops stand not far away from the outskirts, from the edge of the city. So people, nevertheless, earlier or later, they're coming back because the money are finishing and they cannot afford to live to be refugees, let's say, in the Western Ukraine, because a lot of people actually thought that the war will finish soon, and it's not happening right now. So it's too early, of course, to say that it's safe enough to come back. If we talk about Eastern Ukraine, for example, in Donbass, the areas of Donetsk and Lugansk regions, the situation is absolutely different. If, for example, it became more or less safer around Sumy and Kyiv, then it's not the case with Donbass, where the governor of Donetsk region is calling people not to wait for the evacuation, but to go themselves, because the Russians are claiming that they are going to concentrate all their efforts to gain Donbass, right, and to take those areas.
In fact, Russia has always maintained that a big part of what would make them consider ending the war, so to speak, is for, essentially Ukraine to give up the Donbas region and to consider Crimea as Russian territory. I mean, are those conversations, do you think, happening among ordinary Ukrainians? Do you reckon that they too are in some ways keeping up with these negotiations and bringing forward their opinion about what they're willing to give up in order to see the end of this crisis?
The wars that started in Donbass in 2014 and lasted for the past 8 years exhausted people so badly that there were also discussions about, prior to the 24th of February, discussions to actually give up on those territories and, hand them over to the Russian authorities. I'm not talking about the politicians. I'm not talking about the core of the thoughtful, active part of the society, but about ordinary people. But after what happened right now with many cities of Ukraine, where yesterday was one of the most intense days because you could read about the explosions all over Ukraine. Here in Kharkiv, 7 people died, many more wounded, and it happened, in the evening. So after this, Ukrainian population will not hand over these territories, really, because they understood what means it's basically united Ukrainians a lot, and Ukraine has in the constitution of the country, there is a clear listing of the areas, territories, regions that belongs to Ukraine, and Ukraine will stick to this map, to its sovereignty, to its unity. So Ukrainians, after seeing what happened, I don't think that Ukrainians will want to do something. Whatever it should be done, it should be actually decided during the referendum. Whatever can happen, but it should be. It's not the decision of one politician or by Russia.
Yeah, and I do wonder how possible holding a referendum would be in a context where there's so much turbulence. But you mentioned that, for instance, just last night or just yesterday, 7 people lost their lives where you're at in Kharkiv. As a journalist, I imagine part of what you're trying to weigh up is going into these areas where there's great turbulence and violence, but also looking out for your own safety, at the very least for your family and those you love. How have you been treating what's taking place in your country over the past few weeks?
It's an extremely difficult because I've been covering the war in the past 8 years, for the past 8 years, because I'm originally from the areas that are now belong to the Russian control. And in the course of these past months, I actually lost my mother. She died, and I was not able to come to attend the funeral ceremony. And similar to that, there is a quite problematic, apart from the war and shelling and mortar shelling, grad shelling, etc. So there is also, a lot of people are now dying, and it's difficult sometimes to conduct this process. People in the areas controlled by the Russian separatists, they have forced mobilization. So there is lack of men. I'm talking about actually to organizing the funerals as well, because you need men to help to carry the coffins, right? So it was extremely difficult because there is no safe place right now in Ukraine. If in 2014 people could make the decision to come either to Kyiv or to Moscow, for example, depending on their inclination and the right assessment of the situation, then now it's dangerous everywhere. As I just said yesterday, I've been reading about the explosions all over Ukraine, and not only in these major cities like Kharkiv or Kyiv, but in Poltava, in Pavlograd, in Dnipro, everywhere, like surrounding the area, all over Ukraine. Yeah. So it's not safe. Everyone can become the part of the collateral damage.
Sure. Really devastating hearing you speak about that, and condolences to you and your family for the loss of your mother. I imagine it's one of the worst things to have to experience on top of the crisis that you're already dealing with there in that country. But nonetheless, thanks very much indeed for making time to speak to us. Really do appreciate it. Kateryna Malofieieva is a journalist who's currently speaking to us there from Kharkiv. It's one of the largest cities in Ukraine, which hasn't been spared the devastation that has really engulfed much of that country since Russia's invasion a few weeks ago. We'll keep watching that story as it continues to develop.